Good evening. You're watching The Digital Age, and I'm James Goodale. Recent polls show that voters preferred the Democratic Party by about 7 to 8 points. But when the voters are asked what they think of Hillary Clinton versus Giuliani, the numbers come down to 2 or 3 points, particularly in the swing states such as Florida. 2 or 3 points is the margin of error. What is the problem with Hillary? Would Hillary do better as a populist candidate? Would she, as a populist candidate, win? And joining us tonight to discuss this question is Laura Flanders of Air America Radio. And she's written a book. You can go get it at your bookstore. It's called Blue Grit. The Democrats take politics back from the politicians. Great book, I read it. And on my right, we have Tom Edsall, one-time reporter for the Washington Post, New Republic, and you can see him on your computer, the Huffington Post, and also Laura Flanders, the Huffington Post. My goodness, look at the Huffington Post. This book is called Building Red America. It's a very literary book. It's got 60 pages of footnotes, but it's a terrific book. Building Red America, the New Conservative Coalition, and the Drive for Governmental Power. Okay, the first question to you, Tom. Is the Democratic Party a populist party?
No, you could not describe it that way.
How would you describe it?
I would describe it as a bifurcated party with an elite made up of quite well-educated professionals who really dominate the party, dominate proceedings, and dominate the conventions and agenda-setting processes, and who make up about 35 to 40% of Democratic primary voters, and then roughly 60% who tend to be lower income, have a fairly high percentage of people who are dependent on government, from the CHIP program to food stamps to Medicaid, but they have less of a voice, I would say. But to call it populist, I don't think captures the meaning of populism.
Which is what?
I think populism...
I mean, all those people are getting the stamps there. I mean, aren't they the people who we think of within the populist part?
But they don't set the agenda of the party. They're not in power, in effect, in the party. Secondly, what you might call the populist coalition is divided on race and a lot of other issues, on abortion, and so you basically have, if there were a populist coalition, it's split in two, so it's very hard for a party, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, to be a populist party in that sense.
Is the Democratic Party a populist party, Laura Flanders?
Well, first you have to ask, what is the Democratic Party?
I don't know, what
and
is
then we
it?
can define what populism is. But
well, he just
the
defined
party
it.
is everything from, you know, the leaders in Washington, the people that raise the big bucks from the deep pocket donors, to the little person on the street who is trying their best to run for local office with nobody supporting them except their local union chapter or their local church. You've got a party that spreads that whole gamut from what I call, you know, the penthouse set, the penthouse party that's congealed a lot of power and money in Washington and not invested very much in the streets, to the people that I write about, the blue grit Democrats, who are the folks saying, wait a minute, this party is not barely fielding a team in half of this country. They don't have a functioning electronic voter roll that works. They don't have websites in most states. They don't have a party that has staff in most states. About 4 years ago, these blue grit Democrats woke up and said, we better piece this together ourselves, and that's what they've been doing. So I think the Democratic Party structurally and politically is in a certain kind of transition, forced on it from the bottom up, but there are certainly plenty of penthouse Democrats left, amongst whom I would count Hillary Clinton, who want to keep the lid on that kind of bottom-up energy and keep ruling from the top.
We'll get to Hillary again in a minute. Tom, you have said that a great factor in the forming of the present Democratic Party and in society is what we call, in this program, the digital revolution. We have been dealing with that program actually since 1980. It was then called the Telecommunication and Information Revolution, title of this program. It morphed into the digital age, hence the digital age. You say this is one of the great revolutions, two great revolutions of the last 50 years, the other one being the women's revolution. How is the digital revolution, or you call it technical whatever revolution, impacted the Democratic Party?
Well, insofar as it's a web revolution, or web-based one, I think it's been very beneficial to the Democratic Party. The web on the whole, I would say, is more liberal and more democratic than it is Republican. That's not the case 8-10 years ago, when I think Republicans did have a leg up on the web. But it's become a tool to both communicate, to mobilize, and to raise a lot of money, tons of money. And it's been crucial in the Democrats catching up to parity, if not, well, now they're actually doing better than the Republican Party on the money front.
Your technical word here, as I've got in front of me, the technological, scientific, economic revolution, okay? It's greater than the digital revolution. It's greater than the impact of the web. What has this done to white men?
Some of them it's been very tough on, especially white men, or men in general, who work in manufacturing industries. Guys who worked on the basis of the strength of their shoulders and backs have had a very tough time. But men and women who know how to manipulate and use technology have done pretty well. It's really had a education effect more than anything else. It's increased the disparity of income between people who have college and professional degrees versus those who are just high school graduates. High school graduates have stagnated or fallen behind, and people with college degrees, and more so with professional degrees.
And where have the white high school men gone, and the white high school women gone?
A lot of them to the Republican Party. And that is the biggest weak point of the Democratic Party at this point, is their lack of support among what you would call working class white voters, who used to be a mainstay of the party.
Okay, so you talk about blue grit, the fact that the Democratic Party is not there, it should be more organized, so forth and so on. How do you organize the party, or do you organize the party to meet the issue that he just raised with respect to white high school men?
Well, I think it's happening at least in part. If you look around the country and you see the enthusiasm that a lot of voters greeted the initiatives to raise the minimum wage, even in very red states like Nevada and Florida in 2004. Those were some of the big victories of that year for that initiative. Now, it wasn't a Democratic initiative per se, but it was heavily backed by the same labor unions and grassroots groups like ACORN that support the Democratic Party. They found that those initiatives were popular in every district, every county of those two states, rich, poor, rural, urban, conservative, liberal. They would have raised the minimum wage by $1 and a little bit more, and that's now been sent the message to Congress that we want a federal minimum wage increase, which is what we got this year once we got over the president's veto. That kind of initiative, putting the Democratic Party back on the side of working people, is a big part of what the Democratic message, I think, has been in this Congress. But I think you've also got to say that looking towards the future, the white population is going to be the minority population. And I would say for the Democratic Party to succeed in these next years, it needs to look much more closely, for example, at the biggest potential swing voting bloc we have in this country, which are Hispanic voters and immigrants. That population is up for grabs. We saw the Republicans do well with Latino voters in 2004. The Democrats snatched that advantage back in 2006. If they're sitting on their laurels thinking, well, we're going to do great with the Latino voters because we did last time, I think they're dreaming. they did well with Latino voters in '06 because of how horrendous the Republican proposals around immigration were. But that's a constituency that needs to be fought for. So my point would simply be that if the Democratic Party spends its time trying to pursue those wayward, particularly white male conservative voters in '08, they're going to be missing, the big bonanza, which could be the Latino vote.
No, you don't agree with that. I read one of your columns in which you said that the main reason that the Democrats did well in the 2006 election was that white men switched.
There was a substantial gain of white men.
So she's not right, is she?
No.
No. And why not?
One, I don't think that one excludes the other. You can appeal to Hispanics and you can appeal to white guys. I mean, there's not they're not mutually exclusive, and in fact, Hispanic voters tend to be socially conservative. One of the reasons why Republicans got them.
Can I just interrupt for a second
Yeah.
on Hispanics? But with the anti-immigration attitude the Republicans have taken, are the Hispanics really that much of a worry for the Democrats?
I think right now the Republicans Republicans have really committed a form of suicide.
Okay, so how do you get these white men? Laura has a solution. You got a solution? Well, solution, I mean, that assumes that you're advising the Democratic Party. Find a different way to answer the question than the way I put it.
I think that Bill Clinton in 1992 did very well, relatively speaking, with white men. He had the lowest, smallest gender gap of any presidential candidate, Democrat, running since 1980. And what he did was make clear during the campaign that he was not going to be controlled by any Democratic interest group. And I think that's where these voters, they want to have a sense that there is going to be a party that will support people across the board, not by some class, race, or gender.
But Clinton did well in '92 because Perot took a lot of the voters, and Perot took away a lot of the white male voters that otherwise would have gone to the Republicans. I mean, my point is we've had election after election with Democratic candidates going for these swing voters, the undecided, the white male voters that have been the particular worry to Democratic leaders, when the Democrats are sitting on a majority of poor people, of immigrants, of gays and lesbians, of women, of African Americans, you name it. They've got constituency galore, small farmers, small business people. They constantly run away from their base to try to cater to this constituency that they're chasing after, and that's, I think, where the mistake is. Because when you have a candidate talking, you used the word populist earlier.
Who was an example of
well,
this
let's
kind of
talk
candidate?
about some of the people that won in 2006. You had 27, I think, out of 30 Democratic pickups in the House, people who differed with the Clinton line on trade. Now, that is a populist kind of an issue. We're going to stand up for the small family farms, the small businesses, against the massive macro agribusiness, for example, that was helped by NAFTA and the other trade agreements. The victory of those House members and every single one of the Senate pickups on the Democratic side is an indication, it seems to me, and those were people that held very different opinions on social issues, that Democratic voters can be stimulated, or voters can be stimulated to vote for Democrats if the focus is on those economic issues that have broken with the Democratic pack in the past.
I don't argue about the trade issue, but if you look at the, the people that you're talking about are just the ones that are now in trouble with the left wing of the Democratic Party. These are what they call the Bush dogs. They voted disproportionately. This group voted disproportionately. Take a look.
Tester, Webb. I mean, those are also people that took positions against the war.
But they are voting for the appropriations. They're voting for FISA. They're voting on all the issues. If you take a look at the list of the people who are the Move On and the various groups are most opposed to and most angry at in the Democratic Party, they are just the people who won, and they are the kind of voters who, on trade, That's fine. That's
well, I think they're making a mistake, those candidates, in doing that, because I think that, look at John Tester, for example. He was very clear. Not only was he against trade and he was against the war, the Senate pickup from Montana, but he was also against the Patriot Act, swore to end it, swore to repeal it if he could. That's how he got elected. He gets into office as a freshman Democrat in the Senate, gets under tremendous pressure from a leadership that is encouraging the Democrats to support
positions.
That's not true.
The leadership is not. I mean, Harry Reid was not pushing for that.
Them to support the supplemental funding for Iraq, and they encouraged them to support the expansion of the warrantless wiretapping right before the summer break.
They're not. The leadership was certainly not pushing on the Iraq.
Reid was.
Huh?
Well, they both were saying to vote for it as opposed to against it.
Did Reid vote for the
not
Iraq
Pelosi,
funding?
Not Pelosi, but Reid and Pelosi both voted for the warrantless wiretapping expansion, or at least Reid did.
You don't think that these guys make decisions based on their own voters and what they calculate, or they are just puppets of leadership people?
I think they come under a
guy
lot of
like
pressure.
Tester comes out of there, and you think he's going to just let Harry
Look,
Reid and the leadership?
You're brand new in Washington. You know you've got to get reelected. Do you want to be on the outs with leadership right away? I don't know. Think of Carol Shea Porter, one of the Democratic pickups in New Hampshire, ran an all-out anti-war campaign against the wishes of Rahm Emanuel, and in a district that Rahm Emanuel said wasn't even worth the fight. Did the campaign thanks to a kind of kitchen cabinet of anti-war grandmothers, got elected, and then almost the first thing that happens was she gets shipped off to Iraq on one of those embedded tours and comes back and is told to vote for the supplemental in the name of supporting the troops. You know, I think they do come under a lot of pressure and they feel isolated, and I think they should stick to their guns if they want to keep those voters next time around.
The problem is that the actual vote that you have on something like that, you go to a place like Montana, or you go Claire McCaskill in
Washington?
No, in Midwest. Those voters there, Missouri, do not. The idea that you would not fund American troops in the field under fire just doesn't sell. You cannot defend that position. You can be opposed to the war and vote for calls, but to actually cut off money for American troops, that is a
you got 75%.
It's a liberal fantasy.
You got 75% of Democrats and 41%, I think, of all voters saying they want the troops home from Iraq. You've got 60% of Republican voters in Iowa saying they want the troops home within a year. People are looking for leadership.
The same question, would you support cutting off funds for American troops now in Iraq?
If you would propose the Barbara Lee Amendment, fund them to bring them safely home, if you would give that a hearing, I bet it would get the votes.
Let's turn this to Hillary. The second great revolution that you talk about in your book is the women's revolution, yes. Okay? And you say that sex has replaced race as the principal political issue, or a principal issue.
They echo each other.
And it seems to me you also point out that because of the emphasis on this second revolution, white men have felt further left out because they're not women. Believe it or not. Now, let me ask you a question about Clinton, Hillary Clinton. When Hillary runs, doesn't she present the face of everything that the swing voters, which I'm assuming for the moment are white men, resent?
Well, as the campaign has progressed, I don't mean to be a defender of her, but she has slowly lessened this problem, and that's one of the reasons why she is now actually commanding better than 50% among Democratic voters, because she has ameliorated that. She has had a very substantial gender gap in her base of support, but that also has been diminishing. And I don't think she has been going out of her way, and I think Laura would be very critical of it, to focus on the swing voter and in her voting, the vote on the Iraq terrorism amendment. She has been more supportive of weapons systems than most Democrats. She has tried to stake out a position that in fact addresses those issues in a fashion that Laura would consider wrong, but it's been her fashion and her style of doing it.
So when push comes to shove, you make a point also in here that Democrats' victories are transitory. So 2006, where the Democrats won, may be looked as a transitory moment. And that 2008 is a new ball game, but when push comes to shove, the resentment that you talked about in this book isn't going to come out? I mean, I'm not talking psychologically.
I think given the current lay of the land, Democrats look pretty good at every level going into the 2008 election. I think you'd have to bet, and most people are betting, if you look at the people who actually put money on this stuff, that Hillary will win, that the House is going to remain as Democratic or more Democratic, and the Senate will clearly be more Democratic. I mean, if you're just looking at it from an odds point of view, the Democrats look, it's a very favorable climate. I've just been working on a story about the defense industry. Hillary Clinton gets more defense money. These are people who have been traditionally Republican, but she is getting the lion's share of that money more than Republicans are getting. When they do that, they're doing it because they think she may well win. We got an election to go, but
we are, by the way, quite a way away from it, but we're close to the primaries. Yeah. And the primaries will be over probably in February, so it makes the question relevant.
I mean, my argument is that that the Republicans have developed a construct that has a sustaining, mobilizing mechanism, and that Bush has really fouled things up for them. Whereas the Democrats are capitalizing on Republican failure at this moment, and do not have a coalescing.
Okay, so that means for all those reasons, looks pretty bleak for the Republicans. But surely Hillary Clinton can run as a populist. Because she's got all that headwind behind her that, even Tom Edsall says is there. And so she can really go to the...
Well, she could, but she won't, because she never has been a populist. She's not going to be a populist. Whether she can win without building the kind of support that might come to the enthusiastic support, not just the kind of resigned support, the enthusiastic support that would come to a candidate who showed leadership on issues from healthcare to the war to how to resolve international conflict. You know, whether she can win without doing that, I think, is a big question. It's impossible for me to get my head around the idea that she might win as a populist, because it's so unlikely. But I think that there's no question that this is a Democrat's election to lose. And the way they're going to lose it is to so alienate their activist base that base doesn't show up to do the work. Because if Giuliani is the nominee on the Republican side, there's going to be
it's going to be Giuliani?
If he is, he'll be able to do a lot of mopping up of middle road. Well, at this point, he looks like the strongest candidate they've got.
He's ahead of the polls, so he's going to be the strongest one. Let's talk about appealing to one's base. One of the more fascinating parts of this book is that you've intercepted a post-2002 election communication, not from Karl Rove, but from one of Karl Rove's lieutenants, who looks at the figures and he concludes that there really aren't any independents. All there are Democrats and Republicans, because the independents who say they're independents, when you look how they always vote Republican. So forget that.
Or they always vote Democrat.
Or they always vote Democrat, one or the other, yeah. So forget the middle. Forget the independent votes. Go for the base, full out, through a polarizing message to the base. Is that more or less what your theory is?
That's the theory for a Republican candidate. I think you're going to see that in the coming election, that they're going to try to, the Republicans will try that, with all the talk about terrorist threats, and terror is going to be a big attempted trump card in the coming election. But I think the Democrats cannot afford to do that. One, this whole idea that Laura has of this populist thing, why, if that's the case, why can't in Democratic primaries, let alone a general election, a guy like Edwards or Gephardt, who have been the two populist-like candidates on trade and on the issues you're talking about, why do they stay stuck in the rut way down there? Why, if the populist appeal is so strong, you'd think it would be gangbusters among Democrats, but it gets
Well, I mean,
zilch.
we haven't had any primaries yet in this election, and Edwards, until very, very recently, was ahead in the polls in Iowa. With respect to Gephardt, it doesn't help like to have it.
But how about New Hampshire? Where is Edwards? Excuse me, interrupting. But where is Edwards in New Hampshire?
He's trailing like crazy. But the person that's been making enormous gains, interestingly, in New Hampshire is Bill Richardson. The more people understand his anti-war message,
would you say Bill Richardson's a
the
populist?
more he's gaining. He's got criticisms of trade, but he's really staking his ground on the war
But what
issue.
is the answer to his point is that it's great to have this theory about populism. It's great, as you do so winningly in your book, find these pockets of...
Edwards was immediately targeted early on as a hypocrite, and as a hypocrite around money. Now, while that was a debate that he could have defended himself on, with the mainstream media and the right media going after him on that, and frankly, you know, his Democratic opponents needling him on the same front, that is a particular hot button in American sort of consciousness that I think is an easy one to manipulate. So, I mean, I think that we're still waiting for a candidate who could really show leadership. And it was very hard, I think, for Edwards to sort of break out from the pack. I don't know. I mean, I think it takes work. I think it takes work from the bottom up, in the same way that we've seen a right-wing revolution happen on the right from the bottom up through growing membership organizations like Christian right churches and gun clubs and Bible study groups. And you've seen a party that knew how to feed into the bottom as well as lead from the top. That has to happen on the left, and I believe it is gradually happening on the left. But instead of a party that does nothing but kowtow to its margins, the Democrats are a party that run like the Dickens from theirs and pretend that they don't exist. That's the conflict. The Democrats have always tried to run without really using the juice and the enthusiasm of their base voters. The Republicans have found that even when your base is tiny, people who don't believe, you know, who believe homosexuals should be given conversion treatment and every child should have a gun in high school, even when that base is minute, they figured out how to mobilize it and use it to their advantage. And I think that's what we saw in 2004, when no Republican should have won the White House, but did. And I don't know whether 2008 is really sewn up yet.
Why can't the Democrats do exactly what Republicans did? Why can't they organize themselves better? I don't know, would you agree they're not well organized? At least they could organize themselves better and just appeal to the base.
Well, I think there's a long-standing problem in the Democratic Party that the interest groups that are powerful, unions, women's groups, civil rights groups, so forth, that are basically liberal, they're still used to a world where Democrats controlled things, and they didn't have to worry about winning elections. They just had to worry about having their influence once the Democrats were in power. And they have not adjusted to this new world where Democrats are not guaranteed to be in power.
We'll have to leave it there. We've come to an end.
Okay.
Can I ask you the question?
What's the question?
The question is, can a populist Hillary Clinton win? Yes or no?
No.
Thank you very much, Tom. The same question to you, Laura.
I believe a populist Hillary could win if we had such a thing.
Would another populist, is there a populist candidate that could win anywhere?
At this moment, we've got a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Laura Flanders. And thank you for coming by this week to watch The Digital Age. Come by next week and learn more about the digital age. For The Digital Age, I am James Goodale. Good night.